Hello, I am Betsabeth Sastre Flores, commercial horticulturist from Virginia Cooperative Extension in Loudoun County, Virginia. In a healthy soil, where the roots and other living beings embrace silently, lies the secret of the health of the world. In this microcosm invisible to the naked eye, life itself resides. I follow the four principles of the soil because it is the biodiversity, sustainability, and prosperity of our planet.
All right, here we go with another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, and Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability is joining us. Mary Sketch-Bryant is taking another week off, and she'll be back with us in the very near future. Dr. Benfelt, I believe we'd like to reintroduce our guest from our last episode.
Yes, Jeff, we're pleased to have Nicolas Melas with us again from Millsong Bakery, and really enjoyed hearing a bit of Nico's story. And Nico, the small grains are so important to soil health and building soil health, and also addressing water quality issues. But then I know as a baker, you have a lot of interaction with customers and people at the farmers market. Can you share about their perspective of why, what they ask you questions about with grain production?
Yeah, when it comes to customers and what they're looking for, what they're hoping for, I have a lot of different types of customers. Like in business, they talk about segments, customer segments, but there are a good amount of people that come to my stand at the farmer's market and say, is this wheat organic? Because they have heard about glyphosate in the food or whatever and are trying to avoid that. So when you're selling direct to a consumer, that is a question that you're likely to get a lot. Also, one question that seems to come up is, are you using low gluten or ancient varieties or gluten-free varieties? And so our bakery does not do any gluten-free breads, but we've been involved in the education of our customers about using low gluten grains or ancient grains or heritage wheats and fermenting them naturally, which breaks down the gluten. When you use commercial yeast, you do not break down the gluten. When you use sourdough starter, you create carbon dioxide and break down the gluten at the same time. So I've done a lot of education about that, but people do ask those questions every day.
We're talking today with Nico Melas of Millsong Bakery in Harrisonburg, Virginia. He has experience as a farmer before he became a baker. And Nico, you talked in our previous episode a lot about your experience in France as a baker, and I found those stories to be fascinating. I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to the previous episode, part 1, with Nico Melas, and you talked a lot about your experience learning to bake like the French people bake, and I'm curious if the culture in France is different from that here in the United States. My perception is that the culture is different, especially when it comes to food. There seems to be a true appreciation for craftsmanship in food and food production in France. Is that perception correct?
Yeah, I was amazed. They have regional food cultures, like people identify more so with their particular region, with their particular county, and the foods that they eat there. There's rivalries about salted butter versus unsalted butter versus half salted butter. And each region of France has their go-to, their pick. They have their, there's regions of France that are known for their wine production and regions of France that are known for their cider production. And it's a big point of pride for people to only drink cider or only drink this type of wine because it's from their region. They just have a longer ancestral memory because they have a longer ancestral history in relationship to the land, it seems like, but they've held on to it. You're absolutely right. So yeah, it does not seem that my clientele, they're interested, like I said before, in organic and in low gluten, but it doesn't seem like the fact that I'm telling them that it's grown locally is on their list of things before they get there. When I tell them, they value it and they say, oh, great, okay, I'll support that. But it wasn't on their mind before they walked up to my stand. They didn't expect that. Nobody ever expects that.
And Nico, we're actually talking to you on National Agriculture Day. Thinking about that, how can we, build a greater appreciation for local, regional farmers and create greater understanding of what is involved with food production, particularly at the local and regional level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way that our local farmers treat the land, it affects us in a huge way. It's not just on our foods, the way their decisions affect us. It's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the runoff, it's in the Chesapeake. So the decisions that the farmer makes have large, far-reaching downstream effects. And I'm really thankful that there's so many farmers in Rockingham County and so many really creative and mindful farmers.
Are you a member of the Common Grain Alliance?
Yes, I'm a member of the Common Grain Alliance and work closely with Madeline Smith and others on trying to keep the conversation going at a really, I'd say, deep, granular level on how to encourage wheat quality that is useful for bakers, because there's always going to be a year where a farmer has to sell his crop to the feed mill, and the feed mill is only going to pay $8 a bushel or $10 a bushel for organic, I think. And but we're able to pay much more than that and need to have quality.
If you could sit down with more conventional farmers around our region, the Mid-Atlantic region, maybe dairy farmers, cattle farmers, row crop farmers, and talk with them about the potential, I guess you would say, of growing a value-added crop, a small grains specifically marketed at artisan bakers such as yourself. What would you say to those farmers about the possibilities?
I would say to start with a dwarf, modern, hard red winter wheat variety. There's several out there. One is from NC State called New East. It's spelled Nueast. And one is an older variety that's been around for a decade or so. Well, I say older, I mean older in relation to modern cultivars, but it's called Redeemer. And Redeemer and New East, like I say, are dwarf wheat. They grow like knee high and have a higher yield per acre. They're hard red winter wheats that are well known for having baking characteristics that are good for bakers. And I would recommend being careful with nitrogen application, just because the timing of nitrogen does affect the protein quality. So what we're really after the gluten forming proteins that are in the wheat, and we're not after the proteins in general. So gluten forming proteins are only a large percentage, but only part of the protein in wheat. So when we send our wheat to get sampled, it comes back with a protein percent. That protein might be somewhere between 10 and 14%, but that doesn't mean that it's 14 or 10% gluten forming proteins. It depends on when you apply the nitrogen, and that stuff is important to get a handle on. Otherwise, give it a try. Usually people have beginner's luck and it turns out really great the first time. So there's definitely a market for more hard red winter wheat in in the area.
Nico, I'd also be interested in your perspective on health. We've been promoting soil health, but really the interest in a healthy planet, healthy people, healthy community, and I'm sure with conversations that you probably have conversations about health and diet and nutrition. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, human health is a big topic that we talk about. I believe, just looking at history, from my perspective as a farmer, miller, baker person, I'm not currently growing grains, but I come at it as a farmer. When I think about nutrition, when I think about health, I think about the longevity of people being able to digest grains. So when we are changing everything that there is about bread in the course of 100 years, that to me is a red flag with regards to our ability to digest grains. So we have people that are saying that they cannot digest bread anymore, that they're gluten intolerant. And I really believe that the reasons that that's happening are that we have used more and more modern wheats that are much higher in gluten, and we use them without mixing them in with other grains that are lower in gluten. And truly, the most open and soft loaf of bread that's mixed by hand or at a slow speed at an artisan bakery is going to be quite low in gluten. If you use the high gluten spring wheats, for example, it's just going to be too dense and not a pleasant texture. So the more pleasant texture actually goes along with less gluten, and sourdough fermentation makes it easier to digest. And I just think that we're making a bread that's going to be better for our population over the long haul. That if we're eating the bread from the grocery store over and over and over again, we're slowly going to be taxing our digestive system to have to break down that gluten. So I really think that the protein, the nitrogen that we apply to the fields, timing it just right. Another thing that I think is probably going to be important is for our plants to be being fertilized not through nitrogen that we're applying in the form of nitrates and other forms, but through organic nitrogen, which is created by the soil microorganisms. So if we can somehow get wheat to grow with less soil disturbance, I think that it's going to be getting the exact amount of nitrogen that it needs when it needs it, because it's in communication with the soil microorganisms, rather than us applying it in different forms from manure or litter or whatever. I just have seen that the more regenerative approaches have ended up making wheats that are more balanced, better for baking, and I would imagine better for health. But all this has to be researched. I will say this: flavor and health go together. Flavor and health go together. They've done research on grass-fed beef and at a deep level with regards to nutrient density, and found that the flavor of chicken and beef goes along with the nutrient that's in it. And if you take a bite of bread and it does not taste like grains, there might be something to think about there. And if you take a bite of bread and it tastes like the grains that you're getting, I'm sure that has a big effect on nutrition.
We're talking today with Nico Melas of Millsong Bakery in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And Nico, just a couple of minutes remaining in this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. And I wanted to remind our listeners about a YouTube video that you participated in. It was created by Virginia Cooperative Extension, and it's called Against the Grain, Beyond the Grind. And if you do a search on YouTube, once again, Against the Grain, Beyond the Grain, I found that video, which is about 16 minutes long, I believe, to be fascinating. It tells the story of artisan baking and how it's related to soil health and agriculture, and it really tells the full picture. I really think it's a fascinating video that our listeners will find to be of interest. And my final question for you is about, we see bumper stickers all the time that say support your local farmers or support your farmers market. Is it important that we support local bakers?
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate the support of my customers. And it is important. If there's somebody who's baking with local products or a chef that's cooking with local products, if they put themselves out on a limb like that, that is a challenge. They could be getting much cheaper ingredients that are more consistent if they don't buy local. So a local chef or baker or whatever it is really does need our support because they're doing it for our health and to support the local economy. So we definitely need the support of people, our clients, our customers.
Very well. Dr. Benfeld, any final question?
Nico, if you would have a baking book or cookbook, is there a resource that you'd recommend?
Jeffrey Hamelman has a book called Bread. It's just called Bread by Jeffrey Hamelman. And it's a fantastic book that goes into bread theory and grains and how they work and mixing and how it affects other things. There's other books too, but that's a great text in English that gets right down to the heart of it.
Our guest in this episode has been Nico Melas of Millsong Bakery in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And if you'd like to learn more about their operation, the web address is millsongbakery.com. Nico, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Ish. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you should have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of The Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.